What exactly is hidden beneath the Pentagon? Secret tunnels stretching deep underground, hidden bunkers designed for the end of the world, emergency command centers capable of operating during a national crisis. Some people have even claimed that classified programs far beyond public knowledge are hidden somewhere within the Pentagon's vast complex. Over the years, countless stories, rumors, and theories have surrounded this building. Some sound believable. Others sound like something straight out of a Hollywood movie. But separating fact from fiction isn't always easy. Because when it comes to the Pentagon, much of what happens behind its walls is intentionally kept out of public view. And that's exactly what makes it so fascinating. This isn't just another government building. This is the headquarters of the United States Department of Defense, the nerve center of the world's most powerful military. A place where decisions made in a conference room can have consequences on the other side of the planet. Yet despite being one of the most recognizable buildings on Earth, many people know surprisingly little about what actually goes on inside it. Why was it built in such a strange five-sided shape? What really exists beneath its floors? How does a building this important protect itself? And how much of the mystery surrounding it is actually true? Today, we're taking a closer look inside the most powerful and influential building in America to uncover the story, the secrets, and the hidden world of the Pentagon. And to understand why the Pentagon exists at all, we have to go back to the early years of World War II. As Germany swept across Europe with a series of rapid victories, military leaders in Washington realized the United States needed to prepare for a conflict that was growing larger by the month. And the army was expanding at an astonishing pace. In just about a year, its size exploded from roughly 270,000 personnel to more than 1.4 million. New bases were being built. New troops were arriving every day. Military operations were becoming more complex than ever before. But there was one major problem. The people responsible for running all of this weren't even working in the same building. The War Department was scattered across dozens of offices throughout Washington. Important personnel were spread all over the city, forcing constant travel, paperwork, and communication between separate locations. At a time when speed mattered most, the system was becoming increasingly inefficient. Military leaders needed a solution, not another office building or temporary headquarters, something far bigger. So officials proposed an idea that sounded almost impossible for its time. Build one enormous headquarters capable of bringing the entire War Department under a single roof, a building unlike anything America had ever attempted before. The scale was so ambitious that many questioned whether it could even be done. Yet despite the doubts, the project moved forward. And what happened next was even more remarkable. The building that would eventually become known as the Pentagon wasn't built over decades. It was completed in just 16 months, and the engineering required to make that happen was nothing short of extraordinary. But before a single wall could be built, engineers faced a surprisingly simple question: what shape should this massive headquarters be? The answer ended up defining the building forever. Originally, the Pentagon was planned for a different site near Arlington. The land available there had an unusual shape, and architects began designing a building that could fit it as efficiently as possible. The result was a five-sided structure, a pentagon. But then the location changed. President Roosevelt and other officials raised concerns about the original site, and a new location was selected. Normally, that would have meant starting the design process all over again. But there was a war underway, and time was becoming increasingly valuable. So instead of redesigning the entire project, planners kept a five-sided layout. What began as a practical solution suddenly became the defining feature of one of the most recognizable buildings in the world. And as it turned out, the shape offered some unexpected advantages. Rather than creating one gigantic block of offices, designers organized the building into 5 concentric rings connected by a series of radial corridors that cut through the structure like spokes on a wheel. At the very center sits a 5-acre open-air courtyard, surrounded by layer after layer of offices and hallways. The scale is difficult to comprehend. Each of the Pentagon's 5 sides stretches more than 900 feet in length, making the building one of the largest office complexes ever constructed. Yet, despite its enormous size, the layout was designed to keep people moving efficiently. Thanks to the ring and corridor system, it takes less than 10 minutes to walk between almost any 2 points inside the building. And that's what made the design so revolutionary. A simple rectangular structure would have created endless walking distances. A circular design would have been far more difficult and expensive to construct. The Pentagon managed to find a middle ground. It was large enough to house an entire military headquarters, yet efficient enough to function like a single connected workplace. But creating the design was only half the challenge. Actually building it was a completely different story. Because once the plans were approved, engineers and construction crews faced a task that seemed almost impossible. They were building what would become the largest office building in the world, and they had to do it during wartime. Materials were in high demand, deadlines were incredibly aggressive, and the military wanted the building operational as quickly as possible. So construction began at a pace rarely seen before. Thousands of workers flooded the site. At peak activity, as many as 15,000 people were involved in the project, turning the construction zone into a city of its own. The scale of the work was staggering. To support the massive structure, engineers installed 41,492 concrete foundation piles deep into the ground. Together, those piles stretched for more than 200 miles in total length. Then came the concrete. The Pentagon would require approximately 435,000 cubic yards of reinforced concrete, an amount so enormous that it dwarfed many of the world's most famous buildings at the time. Producing that concrete demanded huge quantities of raw material. Roughly 680,000 tons of sand and gravel were dredged from the nearby Potomac River and processed for construction. And all of this was happening while the United States was preparing for war. Steel was desperately needed for ships, weapons, and military equipment. Using large amounts of it for an office building simply wasn't an option. So engineers relied heavily on reinforced concrete instead. The decision proved so effective that enough steel was saved to build an entire battleship. But perhaps the most remarkable part wasn't the materials, it was the speed. Normally, projects of this size spend years being designed before construction begins. The Pentagon didn't have that luxury. In many cases, sections of the building were being constructed while other parts were still being designed. Architects, engineers, and builders were essentially working at the same time, racing against the clock to bring the project to life. It was a risky approach, but it worked. Just 16 months after construction began, the Pentagon was finished. A massive 5-sided fortress of concrete, corridors, and offices had risen from the ground in record time. And once people finally started moving inside, they quickly realized something. The Pentagon wasn't just a building. It was practically a city. Today, around 23,000 military and civilian employees work inside the Pentagon every day, along with thousands of additional support personnel who help keep the massive complex running. And considering the size of the building, that's not surprising. From the outside, the Pentagon might look like one giant structure. Inside, however, it's a maze of offices, hallways, meeting rooms, operations centers, and support facilities spread across 5 concentric rings. Known simply as rings A through E, these layers wrap around the building's central courtyard like giant circles within circles. Connecting them are radial corridors that cut straight through the structure, allowing people to move between different sections far more quickly than you might expect. And that's important, because every day thousands of people are constantly on the move. Military officers heading to briefings, policy officials rushing between meetings, intelligence analysts reviewing reports, logistics teams coordinating equipment and personnel across the globe, lawyers, engineers, administrators, communications specialists, and countless others all working under the same roof. At almost any hour of the day, someone somewhere inside the Pentagon is making a decision, attending a meeting, preparing a report, or responding to an event happening somewhere in the world. But what makes the Pentagon truly unique isn't just the people who work there. It's the fact that the building was designed to support nearly every aspect of daily life without requiring employees to leave. Inside the complex, there are numerous cafeterias and dining facilities serving thousands of meals every day. There are retail shops, convenience stores, and service centers. Medical facilities provide healthcare support for employees. Fitness centers allow personnel to exercise before work, during breaks, or after their shifts. There are even prayer and meditation rooms available for those who need them. In many ways, the Pentagon functions like a self-contained community, or we can say a city. People can arrive in the morning, spend an entire day working, attending meetings, eating, exercising, and taking care of everyday needs without ever stepping outside the building. And because the Pentagon operates around the clock, the activity never truly stops. While some offices become quieter in the evening, others are just getting started. Night shifts take over. Operations personnel continue monitoring events. Watch teams remain on duty. And somewhere inside the building, lights stay on long after most of Washington has gone to sleep. But as busy as the Pentagon is, not everyone inside has access to the same information. In fact, one of the most fascinating things about the building is that 2 people can work just a few doors apart and have completely different levels of access. Because the Pentagon isn't organized around convenience. It's organized around security. The moment someone enters the building, they begin moving through layers of access control. Employees use identification badges that determine where they can go and what areas they can enter. Some sections of the building are relatively accessible to authorized personnel, while others are restricted to only a small number of individuals. And the deeper you move into certain parts of the Pentagon, the tighter those restrictions become. Security personnel are a constant presence throughout the complex. Some are easy to spot, others blend into the crowd. Surveillance systems monitor activity across the building, while visitors must pass through screening procedures and are often escorted when entering restricted areas. Even official guests don't simply wander through the Pentagon on their own. Access is carefully controlled, and that's because some of the information handled inside the building is among the most sensitive in the world. Military planning, intelligence assessments, crisis response operations, communications involving national defense. Protecting that information requires far more than locked doors. One of the Pentagon's most secure features is the use of specialized areas known as Sensitive Compartmented Information Facilities, or SIF. These highly secure rooms are specifically designed for handling classified discussions and intelligence-related information. Access is tightly controlled, communications are protected, and strict rules govern what can be brought in and out. For many people, these rooms represent the hidden side of the Pentagon that the public never sees. But the security doesn't stop there. Information itself is separated. Different computer networks operate at different classification levels, including unclassified, secret, and highly restricted systems. These networks are intentionally isolated from one another, creating barriers that help prevent sensitive information from moving where it shouldn't. In other words, information travels through the Pentagon very differently than it does through a normal office building. Not everyone sees the same reports, not everyone accesses the same systems, and not everyone is allowed into the same rooms. The result is a building where security isn't just something added afterward. It's built into the way the entire place operates. And nowhere is that more important than the facilities most people never get to see, because beneath the offices, hallways, and meeting rooms lies another layer of the Pentagon's infrastructure, one that has fueled speculation and mystery for decades. After all, when people hear the words Pentagon and underground, their minds tend to go straight to conspiracy theories, secret bunkers, hidden tunnels, underground command centers, perhaps even facilities the public knows nothing about. And while Hollywood has certainly helped fuel those ideas over the years, the reality is both less dramatic and, in some ways, even more impressive. Most people don't realize that the Pentagon extends below ground level. Beneath the 5 floors visible above the surface are additional levels, including basement and mezzanine areas that support the enormous structure overhead. These lower sections aren't filled with mysterious laboratories or science fiction technology. Instead, they serve a far more practical purpose: keeping one of the world's largest and most important office buildings functioning every single day. Hidden below the thousands of offices is a network of infrastructure responsible for moving supplies, supporting maintenance operations, housing critical equipment, and connecting different parts of the complex. Like any city, the Pentagon needs systems that most people never think about: power, communications, maintenance, logistics, and much of that happens out of sight. There are service corridors and operational areas dedicated to keeping the building running around the clock. Teams work behind the scenes to maintain everything from communications equipment to building systems that support thousands of people every day. But the infrastructure below the Pentagon wasn't designed only for convenience. It was also designed for resilience. Because if the Pentagon serves as the nerve center of the US military, then its ability to keep functioning during a crisis becomes critically important. That's why the building incorporates backup communications systems, emergency planning measures, and redundant capabilities designed to maintain operations even if normal systems are disrupted. The goal isn't simply to keep the lights on. It's to ensure that communication and decision-making can continue when they're needed most. And that's where things begin to overlap with some of the Pentagon's most closely guarded operations. Inside the complex are command centers and watch floors that operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. While most office buildings become quiet overnight, parts of the Pentagon never truly sleep. Personnel monitor events around the globe. Information continues to flow. Reports are reviewed. Communications remain active, and teams stand ready to respond if a major crisis unfolds. Of course, this is also where fact begins to blend with speculation. Over the decades, countless rumors have claimed that massive secret bunkers or hidden underground complexes exist beneath the Pentagon. Some stories suggest extensive tunnel networks, Others claim entire command facilities are concealed below the building. The truth is that much of the Pentagon's infrastructure is not publicly discussed in detail, which naturally leaves room for speculation. What is known, however, is that the building contains secure operational spaces, emergency systems, protected communications networks, and infrastructure specifically designed to support continuity during critical situations. Whether that reality is more or less interesting than the rumors depends on who you ask, but one thing is certain. For a building that was completed more than 80 years ago, the Pentagon was built with an extraordinary focus on surviving, adapting, and continuing to function no matter what challenges it faces. And in 2001, that capability would face its greatest test. On the morning of September 11, 2001, the Pentagon became one of the targets in the deadliest terrorist attack in American history. At 9:37 a.m., American Airlines Flight 77, a Boeing 757 that had been hijacked by terrorists, crashed into the western side of the building. The impact tore through the structure, triggering explosions, fires, and widespread destruction. For a moment, it seemed almost unimaginable that a building of such importance could be attacked so directly. Yet what happened next revealed something remarkable about the Pentagon's design. As tragic as the attack was, the damage could have been far worse, and the reason comes down to a stroke of timing and years of engineering work that had already been underway. At the time of the attack, the Pentagon was in the middle of a massive renovation program that had begun years earlier. The section that was struck had recently undergone extensive modernization and structural upgrades. Even more importantly, much of that area had not yet returned to full occupancy. Normally, roughly 4,500 people would have been working in that section of the building. On that morning, only about 800 were present. That fact alone likely saved countless lives, but it wasn't the only reason. The renovated wedge had been rebuilt with reinforced structural supports, designed to improve the building's resilience. New blast-resistant windows had been installed. A modern sprinkler system had been added. Additional steel reinforcement helped tie sections of the structure together more effectively than before. When Flight 77 struck the Pentagon, those upgrades immediately began doing exactly what they had been designed to do. The reinforced structure slowed the collapse. The fire suppression systems helped combat the flames, and the strengthened construction provided valuable time for people to escape. Many experts believe those improvements saved hundreds of lives. In the aftermath of the attack, attention quickly turned toward rebuilding. The effort became known as the Phoenix Project, a fitting name for a structure rising from disaster. The goal was ambitious: restore the damaged section and return it to operation as quickly as possible. Construction crews worked at an extraordinary pace, removing debris, rebuilding damaged areas, and restoring critical infrastructure. Remarkably, the project met its objective ahead of schedule. Less than a year after the attack, the rebuilt section was ready for occupancy. It was a powerful symbol of resilience, not just for the Pentagon, but for the country as a whole. Yet perhaps the most remarkable part of the story is that the building continued to do what it had always been designed to do: operate, communicate, coordinate, and endure. More than 80 years after it first rose from the ground, the Pentagon had once again proven why it remains one of the most important and resilient buildings ever constructed. And that's exactly why the Pentagon still matters today. Most people recognize it as a symbol of American military power, but after looking closer, it's clear that the Pentagon is much more than that. It's an engineering achievement, a building so massive that it functions like a small city, a structure designed during World War II that still serves its original purpose more than 8 decades later, a place where thousands of people work every day, where operations continue around the clock, and where some of the world's most sensitive information moves through secure networks hidden behind layers of security. And beneath the offices, conference rooms, and endless corridors lies an entire world of. What's even more surprising is that the Pentagon isn't completely closed off to the public. Every year, thousands of visitors take guided tours through selected areas of the building, exploring its history, architecture, and some of its most important public spaces. While the secure sections remain off limits, it's one of the few opportunities to step inside one of the most influential buildings in the world and experience its incredible scale firsthand. If you ever had the chance to walk through its endless corridors, would you take it? And what do you think is the most fascinating part of the Pentagon? The engineering, the history, the hidden infrastructure beneath it, or the mysteries that still remain unanswered? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey inside one of the world's most powerful buildings, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and join us for more stories about incredible architecture, engineering marvels, and the hidden worlds behind some of history's most fascinating places. We'll see you in the next video.